Annie stood by the front door, clearly eager to leave. She looked unusually polished tonight, a knee-length brown skirt paired with a matching jacket, the white blouse she bought for a job interview a few weeks earlier, and a pair of high heels she rarely wore. I couldn't help noticing how good she looked. Then again, she wasn't going out with me tonight, so apparently there was no reason to worry about my feelings. She was heading to the club with Veronica, and I had been volunteered, again, to babysit Veronica's daughter, Polly. It was the second Friday in a row I'd been given the honor, and I was beginning to wonder why I kept agreeing to it. Babysitting was something teenagers did for pocket money, not something a 35-year-old married man should have to endure. And Polly wasn't exactly the easiest child to look after. I'd protested, naturally. Annie hadn't cared. She and Veronica were having another girls' night, and I'd been told, rather bluntly, that I wouldn't fit in with the other women. When I'd complained about being left behind again, Annie had accused me of being selfish. It's one evening, Oliver. Honestly, what's the big deal? According to her, I would spend the night doing exactly what I normally did, sitting around watching television. It sounded harmless enough, but something about the whole situation bothered me. Ever since Veronica and Polly had moved into the house next door about a month ago, Annie seemed different. She'd always been the more dominant one in our marriage, but lately her patience with me seemed to be disappearing altogether. The little comments had started first. Jokes about me being unemployed. Remarks about how little I contributed around the house. Even teasing comments about my height. They were always delivered with a smile, but somehow they never felt like jokes. The previous evening had been another example. I'd been sitting quietly in my room with a book when Annie called me downstairs. When I entered the living room, I found her and Veronica sharing a bottle of wine. They were both well into that giggly, mischievous stage of drinking. Polly was there too, sitting cross-legged on the carpet and happily eating ice cream while watching Dad's Army. She immediately looked irritated when Veronica told her to stand. "What's going on?" I asked. Before I could get an answer, Annie grabbed my arm and guided me toward the middle of the room. "Relax, Oliver," she said with a grin. Her breath carried the unmistakable smell of wine. "We're just having a little fun." "Mommy, I was watching that," Polly protested. "I'm going to miss the best part." "Just stand up for a second, sweetheart," Veronica said. She positioned Polly directly in front of me, then stepped back as though preparing to inspect something. I immediately felt uncomfortable. "Can we not do this?" I asked. Annie laughed and held my arms against my sides, clearly enjoying my embarrassment. Polly's dress brushed against my arms, while her brown hair rested against my long blonde hair as she stood directly in front of me. Then Veronica's expression suddenly changed. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed. "What?" Polly asked. "She's taller." Polly looked over her shoulder, then broke into a delighted smile. "Really, Mommy? I'm taller than Uncle Oliver now." "Apparently you are," Veronica laughed. "You've grown so much these last few months." She kept Polly standing against me for another moment, apparently determined to make absolutely certain of the comparison. Then Annie finally pulled me away and wrapped her arms around me in a tipsy hug. "Oh, Oliver," she teased. "My little man, don't look so miserable. Height isn't everything." Easy for her to say. She wasn't the one being compared to an 11-year-old girl. "Can I go now?" I muttered. The laughter in the room was becoming unbearable. But Polly wasn't finished. She skipped over beside me, glanced up at me, and then at her mother, clearly delighted that the joke had turned out to be true. Polly reached up and ran her hand from the top of her own head across toward mine. She giggled when she noticed the gap between her palm and my hair. "At least 2 inches, Mommy," she announced proudly. Then she suddenly looked at her mother with a mischievous grin. "Doesn't that mean I should be babysitting Uncle Oliver instead?" Annie and Veronica burst out laughing. Heat rushed into my face. "That's enough," I snapped. "I've had more than enough of this." I was already in a foul mood when I followed Annie across the hall to Veronica's house for my second Friday night of babysitting. Veronica opened the door, looking almost as glamorous as Annie. Unlike Annie's skirt and jacket, she'd chosen a sleek black cocktail dress that seemed far more suited to an expensive bar than the neighborhood social club they were planning to visit. Her makeup was equally elaborate. "You look amazing," Annie said as the two women exchanged cheek kisses. Then Veronica turned toward me. "Well, look at little Oliver." She gave me an affectionate pat on the shoulder. Both women immediately started laughing again. It wasn't loud this time. It was the kind of suppressed, childish giggling people used when they thought they'd just gotten away with saying something inappropriate.
Fine.
"I'll just go home," I muttered. I'd reached my limit. "Oh, Oliver, come on," Annie said, catching my arm before I could leave. "We're only teasing." "Really? You've been awfully sensitive lately." "Yes, I'm sorry," Veronica added. Her expression suggested she wasn't sorry in the slightest. Then she turned toward the hallway. "Polly, coming, Mommy." Polly appeared a moment later, skipping toward us. She looked even taller than she had the night before. Her long brown hair was pulled into a high ponytail, emphasizing her height, while her blue denim dungarees were worn over a pink t-shirt. "Be good until 9, young lady," Veronica told her, kissing her forehead. "And don't give Uncle Oliver any trouble." "I won't, Mommy." She smiled innocently. But I wasn't fooled. To me, she had the same mischievous streak as her mother. It reminded me of every bully I'd ever dealt with, the boys who'd shoved me into mud, the girls who'd laughed while forcing me toward the girls' bathroom, and the men at the club who found it hilarious that Annie's husband was too short to play snooker properly. Last Friday had actually been tolerable. I'd spent most of the evening reading while Polly watched television. The only real problem had come when bedtime arrived. I'd allowed her an extra 30 minutes, and that had been enough to keep the peace. Veronica had specifically told me to make sure Polly brushed her teeth and combed her hair. I ignored both instructions. Around 10, I quietly checked her room and found her already asleep, surrounded by an army of teddy bears. Tonight, however, Polly seemed determined to make things different. After about half an hour of television, she switched it off with an exaggerated sigh and turned toward me. Until then, I'd barely paid attention to her. I was completely absorbed in the book I'd borrowed from the library that morning. "What are you reading?" she asked in a sing-song voice. "Ian Fleming. You Only Live Twice." She leaned closer. "What's it about?" I sighed and lowered the book. Her large brown eyes were fixed directly on me. "It's a spy novel. For adults." "A spy book?" Her face immediately brightened. "I like spy books. Mommy bought me Harriet the Spy a few weeks ago. It's in my bedroom." "Have you read it?" "Of course." I frowned. "Then why don't you go read that instead?" "But I want to read yours." Her voice became increasingly whiny. "I'm bored." "It's not a children's book," I said sharply, shifting farther along the sofa. She followed me and sat down beside me. That's when I noticed something I really didn't want to notice. Her feet rested completely flat on the floor. Mine didn't. There was still a small gap beneath my heels. Polly caught me looking. A huge grin spread across her face. "Oh, right," she said proudly. "I'm taller than you now." She looked delighted by the discovery. "Can we measure again?"
No.
"Please?" "No, Polly." "Come on." She suddenly jumped off the sofa. "My mommy marks my height on the door," she explained. "She did it at our old house, too. It's funny seeing how much I've grown." "Polly, enough." "No." She folded her arms defiantly. "I want to measure you." Before I could properly react, she grabbed both my arms. My book slipped from my fingers and landed on the carpet. For a moment, I was genuinely stunned. The playful little girl who had been pestering me seconds earlier had vanished. Her expression was now stubborn and determined, as if she had decided that measuring my height was something she absolutely had to accomplish. She tugged at me, trying to pull me upright beside her. For one uncomfortable second, I wondered whether she'd actually manage it. Then I looked at her properly. She was 11. An 11-year-old girl wearing a pink shirt with frilled sleeves, denim dungarees, and a high ponytail, and she still slept surrounded by teddy bears. That realization snapped me out of it. "You're being a very naughty little girl," I shouted. I pulled my arms free with more force than I'd realized I had. Somehow, I managed to drop back onto the sofa. Before Polly could recover, I grabbed her and pulled her across my lap, her legs pointing toward the television while her ponytail hung over the opposite side toward the carpet. For the first time that evening, the teasing stopped. "What are you doing?" Polly cried, struggling against me. "Let me go." I immediately realized I'd let my anger get the better of me. This had gone far beyond an argument over a book or a silly height comparison. "That's enough, Polly," I said firmly, releasing her and standing up. "You don't grab people just because they won't do what you want." She stared at me, stunned and furious. "You can't tell me what to do. Tonight I can. Your mother left me responsible for you." Her eyes filled with tears. She rubbed her arms and glared at me as though I'd committed some terrible offense. "Do you need to go upstairs and calm down?" She didn't answer. For once, there was no teasing smile or mischievous comment. She simply stood there, staring at me with those enormous brown eyes. Oddly, I felt a surge of confidence. For most of my life, I'd been the person everyone talked over. The short guy, the unemployed husband, the easy target. Yet here I was, responsible for someone else, and for once somebody had to listen to me. "You're the one who started this," I said. "Next time, you listen when I tell you to stop." "I hate you," she whispered. The words stung more than I expected. "That's unfortunate," I replied, trying to sound firmer than I felt. "But you're still going upstairs until you've calmed down." Polly gave me one last furious look before storming out of the room. A moment later, her bedroom door slammed upstairs. I considered following her, but decided against it. I'd said what needed to be said. Instead, I returned to the sofa and picked up my book. I couldn't concentrate. For the next hour, I mostly stared at the ceiling, wondering what Polly was thinking in the bedroom directly above me. Then my thoughts drifted toward Annie and Veronica. Were they drunk? Would Veronica be angry when she heard we'd argued? Would Annie accuse me of overreacting? I tried to push the questions away. "They left me in charge," I muttered to myself. "I'm responsible for keeping her safe. That's all." At 9, I quietly went upstairs. When I opened Polly's door, I was surprised to find her already asleep. Her teddy bears were arranged beside her, and the room was peaceful. I quietly closed the door again. Maybe she'd understood that I wasn't going to let her push me around. For the first time all evening, I felt a little proud of myself. Not because I'd frightened an 11-year-old girl, but because I'd finally managed to stand my ground. When Annie and Veronica eventually returned, both were clearly worse for wear. Veronica listened when I explained what had happened. "If she was misbehaving, then you did the right thing by making her calm down," she said. That was enough to ease some of my anxiety. Annie, meanwhile, was considerably more intoxicated. She could barely make it upstairs without leaning on me, so I helped her get ready for bed and made sure she was comfortable. It had been a long time since we'd had any real intimacy, and for a fleeting moment I wondered whether tonight might somehow change that. But she was far too drunk, and I wasn't going to take advantage of the situation. I simply made sure she was safely in bed and left her to sleep. Unfortunately, my peaceful evening didn't mean my babysitting duties were over. The following morning, Annie delivered some unexpected news over coffee. "We're getting our hair and nails done today," she announced casually. Her makeup was still slightly smudged from the night before, and she'd thrown her hair into a messy ponytail. Somehow, she still managed to look beautiful. "Can't you take Polly with you?" I asked.
"No."
"She'll be bored." She took another sip of coffee. "But don't worry. She's having a friend over. They'll entertain each other." I stared at her.
"Wait."
"I'm supposed to watch Polly and another child." Annie looked toward the ceiling and sighed dramatically. "It's only for a few hours, Oliver. Surely you can handle 2 little girls." "I'm not a babysitter." "You'll survive." A few hours later, I discovered exactly who Polly's friend was. The 2 girls were playing hopscotch when we arrived. Fiona was almost exactly Polly's height, perhaps even a little taller. She was an Irish-looking girl with bright ginger hair tied into 2 pigtails and a face covered in freckles. She wore an orange and white spotted dress and possessed a voice loud enough to carry through the entire house. Polly had dressed in a gray button-front pinafore that looked slightly shorter than it probably had a few months earlier. Her recent growth spurt was becoming impossible to ignore. I felt my stomach tighten when she noticed me. What was she going to tell Fiona? Would she complain about our argument? Would she make me the joke again? I caught myself and shook my head.
Stop it.
She's an 11-year-old girl. She's just playing hopscotch with her friend. Why should I care what she thinks? At least, that's what I told myself as I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Girls, I'm heading out now, Veronica called as she pushed open the kitchen door. I'll be back around 5. Okay, Mommy, Polly shouted. Then she glanced toward me with a mischievous smile. Uncle Oliver is here if anything goes wrong. She winked at me. Uncle Oliver, she added, clearly enjoying the words. Our tough babysitter. My face warmed. Well, that's exactly what she needs, Veronica interrupted with an approving smile. She needs someone who'll actually make her behave. Otherwise, she'll walk all over you. Just like her mother, Annie joked. Exactly, Veronica laughed. The instructions for the afternoon were simple enough. The girls didn't need anything special. I just had to keep an eye on them and make sure they stayed out of trouble. That sounded easy. I pulled up a chair at the kitchen table where I could see into the garden and opened my Fleming novel. Outside, Polly and Fiona had moved on to skipping rope. They competed over how many jumps they could manage without missing, loudly announcing every new record. For a while, I was completely absorbed in my book. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, and every so often I could hear birds singing beneath the girls' excited voices. It was actually peaceful. I paused halfway through a page and looked around. A beautiful wife, a comfortable home, a good book. For a moment, I thought maybe my life really wasn't so bad after all. Then a voice interrupted my thoughts. Oliver. I looked up just as the kitchen door opened. Fiona stood there, her face flushed from running around outside. The upper part of her dress was slightly damp with sweat. Could you hold the skipping rope for us? Before I could answer, Polly appeared behind her. I told you not to ask him. She poked her head through the doorway and gave me a look of pure disapproval. He's mean. Fiona ignored her. Please, Oliver. We need 3 people. It's boring with only 2. I'm reading. Come on. Sorry, girls. I'm busy. I immediately regretted how weak my voice sounded. For some reason, the 2 of them together were far more intimidating than either one individually. A painful reminder that I'd probably never make much of a James Bond. Don't be boring, Fiona said. Before I knew what she was doing, she grabbed my right arm. We need 3. Fiona let go. Polly, get his other arm. Polly hesitated for a second. Her eyes met mine, and I could tell she remembered the argument from the previous night. Then she seemed to realize she had backup. A grin spread across her face as she grabbed my left wrist. See? Fiona said. He's tiny. He's like a baby, Polly added with a nasty little laugh. Their teasing had returned. Come on, Uncle Oliver, Fiona giggled. You know you want to play. I absolutely do not. I tried pulling away, but together they were surprisingly strong. Girls, stop it. Neither listened. They tugged me toward the garden while I struggled to keep my balance. I couldn't free either arm. Every time I tried to pull one hand away, the other girl tightened her grip. And I certainly wasn't going to start kicking at them. Fiona was a complete unknown to me. For all I knew, she had an enormous father or several older brothers who'd come looking for me if I hurt her. That wasn't happening. He's so weak. Polly laughed as they dragged me outside. Fiona pointed toward a patch of grass. Stand there. She placed the handle of the skipping rope in my hand. Absolutely not. I dropped it onto the grass. Then I turned around and started walking back toward the kitchen, trying desperately to recover whatever dignity I had left. Stop him, Polly shouted. Both girls burst into laughter. I barely made it 3 steps. They raced after me and grabbed my arms from behind, pulling them backward. I stumbled to a halt. Seriously, girls? I twisted around as far as I could. Can you 2 please stop this nonsense? Their laughter only grew louder. I've had enough. I shouted, trying desperately to pull myself free. My attempt only made things worse. I lost my balance and went sprawling onto the grass. Before I could get back up, Fiona climbed onto my back and pinned my arms beneath me. Polly sat beside me, looking down with an amused expression. "Your hair is really long," she observed. Fiona reached over and ran her fingers through it. "Isn't it pretty?" "Just like a girl's," Polly added. That was the final straw. "Let me up right now." "Why don't you want to play with us, Uncle Oliver?" Polly asked innocently. "Is it because you're a boy?" "I'm not a boy," I snapped. "I'm a grown man." Fiona looked at Polly. "Did you hear that? He says he's not a boy." Polly giggled. "That's fine then." She reached into the pocket of her pinafore and pulled out a pair of small gray hair ties. "What do you think, Fiona?" Fiona immediately understood. "Put his hair into pigtails?" "Definitely." "No." I struggled harder, but Fiona kept me from getting up while Polly gathered my hair into 2 bunches. The 2 girls laughed as they worked, completely delighted with their ridiculous idea. After several minutes, Fiona finally stepped back. "Okay, let's see." I scrambled upright, but Polly was already grabbing my arms again, turning me around so she could admire her handiwork. Unfortunately, there was no avoiding it. 2 ridiculous bunches of hair hung on either side of my head. "Much better," Polly announced. "Now you can play." "Absolutely not." I immediately reached up to undo the hair ties. "Don't you dare," Fiona shouted. Polly slapped my hand away, not hard, but enough to stop me. "Leave them alone. We worked hard on those." Fiona burst out laughing. "Look at him. I think he's actually embarrassed." "I'm not embarrassed," I muttered. I was, of course. I had never felt more ridiculous in my life. Polly suddenly adopted a thoughtful expression. "Maybe we should give you a consequence if you keep refusing." "Polly, please." Fiona handed me the skipping rope again. "Your turn." Polly smiled. 369. "I don't even know how to play this." "We'll teach you." Then Polly tilted her head. "Actually, I think we need a new name for you."
What?
"Olivia." Fiona immediately laughed. "Olivia? That's funny." Polly nodded enthusiastically. "He can't be Uncle Oliver while he's playing with us." "I can absolutely be Oliver." Neither girl seemed interested in my objection. "Come on, Olivia," Fiona said, holding the rope. "Your turn." I stood there feeling completely out of place while they explained the game. It was humiliating enough being dragged into a children's game against my will. The fact that they'd also turned my hair into ridiculous pigtails somehow made the whole situation even worse. Fiona went first, counting enthusiastically as she jumped. When her turn ended, she stepped aside. "Your turn, Olivia."
No.
"Come on," Polly insisted. "Don't be difficult. I'm going to be terrible at this." "That's okay," Fiona said. "We'll help." And she was right. I was terrible. I barely managed a couple of jumps before catching the rope around my shoes. Both girls burst out laughing. "Try again," Polly encouraged. "I'm trying." "You're still thinking like Uncle Oliver," Fiona teased. "You have to actually play." Polly suddenly grabbed Fiona's hand. "She's right. What are you doing? We need to fix something." Before I could ask what she meant, the girls ran toward the house. I remained standing in the garden, staring after them. The skipping rope lay at my feet. For a moment, I considered following them. Then, an uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach. Whatever they were planning, I suspected I wasn't going to like it. I glanced at my watch. 4 o'clock. Only another hour before Annie came home. "Just stop this nonsense," I whispered to myself. But the girls were already running back. Polly was carrying an armful of clothes. "Put these on." I stared at the pile in disbelief. "What are those?" "Change in the kitchen," Polly instructed. Fiona jumped excitedly beside her. "This is going to be hilarious." I looked down at the clothes again. There appeared to be some sort of tartan dress among them. I slowly looked back at the 2 girls. Absolutely not. Their matching grins told me they had no intention of giving up. "I remember that dress," I said, staring at the tartan fabric. "Polly wore it a couple of weeks ago." I took a breath and tried to sound firm. "That's enough, girls. You've had your fun. I'll hold the rope if you want, but I'm not putting that on. The girls exchanged a quick glance. Then both of them erupted into excited giggles. Before I could figure out what they were planning, everything became chaotic. Somehow, within moments, my shirt, trousers, and socks had been removed and tossed aside. Girls, stop. I couldn't believe I was having to say it again. Then Polly reached for the clothes she'd prepared, and Fiona hurried over to help. Quick. A moment later, they were pulling a pair of plain white underwear and bright red socks with little ruffles at the top into place, followed by a white t-shirt with frilled sleeves. I was too stunned to properly process what was happening. Finally, they lifted the tartan dress over my head. Fiona carefully straightened the fabric while Polly adjusted the shoulders. Then Fiona tied the waist ribbon into an elaborate bow. I stared down at myself. I can't believe this. It fits, Polly exclaimed. Of course it does, Fiona said, laughing. The dress was a pinafore-style outfit, similar to the gray one Polly had been wearing earlier. The bodice ended around my chest, with two wide, frilled straps resting over my shoulders. The skirt was short and heavily pleated. I couldn't help staring at my bare legs beneath it. They looked strangely pale and exposed above the red ruffled socks. Polly clapped her hands. You look adorable, Olivia. Fiona looked equally impressed. We could take her outside, and nobody would know. Exactly, Polly said. Come on, Olivia. Let's see if you can skip properly now. She picked up one end of the rope. I stood there in disbelief. Only an hour earlier, I had been Oliver, a 35-year-old man sitting at the kitchen table with a James Bond novel. Now the girls had dressed me almost exactly like themselves. And, somehow, they decided my name was Olivia. Back to 369, Polly announced. I reluctantly stepped between them. Ready, Olivia? Ready. My voice was barely audible. Go. The rope swung. I jumped. There wasn't really any alternative. The pleated skirt moved with every jump, and I became painfully aware of how ridiculous I must have looked. You're getting better, Polly shouted. To my surprise, I actually began finding the rhythm. Soon I was taking turns with them, holding the rope while Polly or Fiona jumped, then stepping back into the middle when it was my turn. They taught me the songs and insisted I sing along. Use a girl's voice, Polly ordered. I tried. Both girls burst out laughing. You sound just like us, Fiona said. You're adorable. I wanted to disappear. At some point, I realized my watch was gone. I had no idea what time it was anymore. The girls didn't seem remotely concerned about when Veronica might return. I was. Every passing minute made my stomach tighten. Eventually, the skipping stopped. Polly had another activity ready. Come sit with us, Olivia. The three of us sat cross-legged on the grass and began making daisy chains. I looked toward the kitchen. My clothes are right there. Don't worry, Polly said cheerfully. You're already wearing clothes. She pointed at my dress. Pretty clothes for a pretty girl. I need to change. I stood up. I can't stay like this. Polly's expression immediately changed. No. She grabbed my arm. Fiona joined her, and suddenly they were pulling me back toward the grass. Please, I begged. This has gone far enough. I spotted my discarded clothes near the kitchen door. They were only a few yards away. I tried reaching them. The girls pulled me down again. Fiona climbed onto my back while Polly held my arms. I struggled, but they had me pinned. The skirt of the dress shifted upward as I moved, and the cool grass brushed against my legs. You're wearing your clothes, Olivia, Polly insisted. Those are boy clothes. But they're mine. Why would you want those when you can be Olivia? I opened my mouth to answer. Then I heard the kitchen door creak. My entire body went rigid. A moment later came a startled gasp. Fiona, get off him, Veronica. I couldn't bring myself to look up. I kept my eyes fixed on the grass, wishing desperately that I could somehow disappear. What on earth is going on out here? Veronica demanded. Polly answered before I could. We made Uncle Oliver pretty. She sounded enormously proud. So, he could play skipping with us. She giggled. Isn't he pretty, Mommy? Veronica was silent for a moment.
What?
Then more confused. How did this happen? Her attention shifted to the dress. Polly, isn't that your good dress? She sounded genuinely concerned now. You're going to get it dirty. Sorry, Mommy. Polly's voice suddenly became innocent. I didn't think about that. Then she added brightly, I'll help you clean it. And the socks too, Veronica added, still staring at me in disbelief. Then her eyes dropped lower. She noticed the dress had shifted and immediately gasped. Polly, are those really what you made him wear? I finally managed to lift my head. Tears were already gathering in my eyes. I tried to stop them, I said quietly. I really did. I was close to breaking down completely, which probably made the whole situation look even more pathetic. Come on, Veronica said. Her voice wasn't gentle. She sounded angry, although I couldn't tell whether she was angry at Polly, Fiona, me, or the entire ridiculous situation. She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the house. As we passed the kitchen door, I looked desperately toward my clothes. My clothes. Annie picked them up with a long, frustrated sigh. I can't believe this, Oliver. It's not my fault. They made me. Annie's expression hardened. Made you? She stared at me. You're telling me 2 little girls forced you into a dress? Yes. And made you wear those socks? I nodded miserably. And everything else? I couldn't bring myself to answer. Annie shook her head. Let's just get home. I followed her silently. Then she stopped. Actually, we're not going out the front. Why? Because someone might see you. So what? Annie's frustration suddenly boiled over. They'll just see me walking with some ridiculous little girl, won't they? A little girl with pigtails and frilly socks. Annie, please. That's when I really looked at her. She had changed her hairstyle. Her long hair had been cut into a neat shoulder-length bob. She looked stunning. And somehow that only made me feel worse. I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. For several days afterward, things between us were painfully awkward. Annie barely spoke to me. She did, however, insist that I wash and return the clothes to Veronica. When I finally took them over, Veronica accepted them with a barely concealed smile. I had absolutely no idea how to handle any of it. What was I even supposed to say to Annie? Sorry I ended up dressed like a little girl, because 2 little girls made me do it. It sounded ridiculous even inside my own head. The tension between us seemed to stretch across the entire bedroom. By Wednesday night, I couldn't stand it anymore. I gathered my pillows and moved into the spare room. Annie didn't ask me to come back. She didn't say anything at all. Then on Friday morning, she finally spoke. Unfortunately, the first thing on her mind was her weekend. Veronica and I were planning to go to the club tonight, she said. But she doesn't want to pay for a babysitter. I can watch Polly. The words came out quietly. I didn't want to do it. Not remotely. But I couldn't think of another answer. Annie studied me. Are you sure? I nodded. We can't have another incident like last time. There were 2 of them. I replied automatically. The moment I said it, I wished I hadn't. Last time there were 2 girls. I corrected myself. I'll be fine with just Polly. I avoided her eyes. That afternoon, Polly arrived with Veronica after school. I'd seen them coming up the path and immediately retreated upstairs. I didn't want to face her. Polly was still wearing her blue and white gingham school dress. Seeing her in that uniform brought the entire humiliating afternoon rushing back. Then came the sweetest voice imaginable. Hello, Uncle Oliver. I looked down. Polly was smiling innocently. Her hair was naturally tied into 2 pigtails, complete with little bows. The same style she'd given me. I couldn't help wondering whether she'd chosen it deliberately. Knowing Polly, I wouldn't have been surprised. Nothing naughty tonight, young lady, Veronica warned. I'll be very, very good, Polly promised. She twirled around in her pink skirt, played with her pigtails, and gave both women an innocent hug on her toes. It was an impressive performance, but I wasn't buying it. Not for a second. Still, when she sat quietly in front of the television without saying a word, I didn't know what to make of her. Then she politely asked me for a glass of milk. I stared at her. She smiled sweetly. Please. I got it for her.
She thanked me.
Then, unbelievably, she went upstairs to bed exactly on time, without a single complaint. That was somehow worse than the teasing. Open hostility, I could understand. This was different. Now I felt like James Bond facing one of those elaborate schemes where the villain's plan wasn't obvious until it was already too late. The pattern continued for the next several weeks. There were the occasional arguments over bedtime, but otherwise Polly was remarkably well behaved. She was polite, quiet, and almost strangely considerate. Eventually, I began wondering whether the whole dressing up incident had meant as much to her as it had to me. Perhaps, in her mind, it had simply been another childish game, no different from dressing a doll. I wished desperately that Annie could see it that way. Unfortunately, she couldn't. I was still sleeping in the spare room, and the distance between Annie and me seemed to remain exactly where it had been since that humiliating afternoon. Then Veronica came up with an idea. A weekend away in Yarmouth. I wasn't enthusiastic. The thought of spending an entire weekend with the three of them wasn't exactly appealing after everything that had happened. But I wanted things between Annie and me to improve. So I agreed. It was only 2 nights, and the drive would take roughly 2 hours. When Veronica told us she'd booked 2 connecting double rooms, I felt a little more optimistic. One room would be for Annie and me, while Veronica and Polly would have the other. Maybe this was what we needed. A chance to put the awkwardness behind us. A chance to start again. We were supposedly leaving at 7 in the morning. That plan lasted about an hour. 7 became 8. 8 became 9. 9 somehow became 10. By the time everyone was finally ready, I'd spent most of the morning sitting in Veronica's living room while Polly watched television. I was more than ready to leave. When Annie finally appeared, however, I couldn't help smiling. The weather was warm, and she'd dressed accordingly. She wore denim shorts with a straw boater covering her newly cut hair. Her legs were tanned and elegant in the bright late-morning sunshine. She looked wonderful, and seeing her like that reminded me just how badly I wanted our marriage to feel normal again. I was even willing to sit in the back seat beside Polly. That was how desperate I was. "That's very considerate," Annie said, giving me one of her first genuine smiles in days. I climbed into the back. "Mommy, I forgot my sunglasses," Polly suddenly announced. "They're in my bag. Can I just get them?" I closed my eyes. "Please tell me we're not doing this already," I muttered. Polly jumped out and went around to the trunk. Then she suddenly remembered something else. "I need my Wii," and off she went back into the house. "This should be fun," Veronica said brightly. I wasn't quite as optimistic. Eventually, however, everyone was ready, and we finally pulled away. 2 hours. 2 hours sitting beside Polly. I hoped I could survive it. After a few minutes, Polly leaned toward me and inspected the book in my hands. "Are you still reading that boring book?" I showed her the cover. "You Only Live Twice" isn't boring. You were practically begging to read it a few weeks ago. "I was not," she protested loudly. From the front seat came Annie's voice. "Both of you behave." I looked up in surprise. "If you two can't get along, we'll turn around and go home." Apparently, I was included in the warning. A little later, Polly reached over and helped herself to a handful of my sherbet lemons without asking. "Hey," I said, reaching for them. "You should ask first." She ignored me. Instead, she stuffed several sweets into her mouth at once and giggled. For a moment, I saw the old Polly again. The mischievous one. The one who clearly enjoyed testing my patience. Without thinking, I reached over and knocked her packet of Dolly mixtures from her hand. The sweets scattered across the floor in a colorful mess. "Mommy." Polly's voice immediately filled the car. "Oliver threw my sweets." Annie turned around sharply. "Oliver." I sank back into my seat. Honestly, it's like having 2 children back there. Then came the sentence that hurt more than I expected. "Are you ever going to grow up?" The words lingered in the car. I stared silently out the window. But inside my head, I was suddenly back in Veronica's garden. The tartan dress. The pigtails. The skipping rope.
Fiona laughing.
Polly calling me Olivia. Everything I tried so hard to forget came rushing back. I didn't answer. For once, there was nothing I could say. "Exactly, Uncle Oliver," Polly added primly, lifting her chin. "You're supposed to be the grown-up. You should act like one." By the time we finally reached Yarmouth, I was more than ready to get out of the car. Perhaps partly because of everything that had happened lately, I felt determined to prove that I was still perfectly capable of looking after myself. I volunteered to unload the luggage. Annie gave me a doubtful glance. I ignored it. There were several enormous cases to deal with, including Polly's pink suitcase and a separate bag that seemed to contain an entire shoe collection. I had no idea why 3 people needed so much luggage for 2 nights. Still, I carried everything inside without complaining. Then I noticed something. My brown weekend bag was missing. I checked the trunk again. Nothing. I looked beneath the blanket that had been covering the luggage, and then back at the cases I'd already removed. My bag isn't here. Veronica pushed her sunglasses up slightly. What's wrong? My weekend bag. I can't find it. Annie sighed. Oh, Oliver. You're joking. I'm not. I'm certain I packed it. I could remember placing everything inside it. I remembered carrying it downstairs. But had I actually put it in the car? I was almost certain I had. Then I noticed Polly. She was standing beside her pink suitcase, wearing heart-shaped sunglasses. And she was eating my sherbet lemons. My temper snapped. She did it. Polly stopped chewing. Did what? She must have taken my bag out when she went back inside for her things. Her expression immediately changed to innocent confusion. I didn't. You did. Oliver, Annie warned. Who else could have? Why would Polly do that? Because she likes making me look stupid. The words came out harsher than I'd intended. Polly's eyes immediately filled with tears. I didn't do anything, Mommy. She turned toward Veronica. He's always horrible to me. I stared at her. Oh, here come the tears. The moment I said it, I knew I'd made things worse. You don't know what she's like, I insisted. She knows exactly how to make everyone believe her. Annie's expression hardened. Enough. She grabbed my arm and steered me toward the hotel entrance. Be quiet. I'm just trying to explain. Quiet, Oliver. She repeated it several times as we entered the lobby. While Veronica handled the check-in, Annie kept hold of my arm, her patience completely gone. Then she pulled me into our room. Not another word. But Annie. Stop. She turned toward me. You've spent the entire drive arguing with an 11-year-old. Because she keeps provoking me. What's wrong with you? Annie demanded. You're a grown man. You're supposed to be my husband. I opened my mouth. She cut me off. Just stop. I wished I had listened. Instead, everything I'd been holding inside for weeks suddenly came pouring out. You don't understand. She's doing this deliberately. Annie stared at me. Who is? Polly. I paced around the room. She's been waiting for another chance. She's been pretending to be sweet for weeks, but I know what she's doing. Even as I said it, I knew how ridiculous I sounded. But I couldn't stop. She planned all of this. Annie shook her head. Then she sighed. You know what? If you're determined to behave like a child, I'm going to treat you like one. She opened the connecting door. A moment later, she returned carrying Veronica's suitcase. This room is for the adults. She pointed toward the adjoining room. You can sleep in there with Polly. I stared at her. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. Annie, we need to talk.
No.
We don't. She stepped closer. When you start behaving like a grown-up, I'll start treating you like one. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then, to my complete shock, Annie grabbed me and lifted me off the floor. Annie! I struggled in surprise as she carried me toward the bed. Put me down. She deposited me onto the mattress. Polly had apparently come into the room and was staring at us in disbelief. What is Uncle Oliver doing? Annie looked at her daughter, then back at me. I've had enough. Her voice was cold. Someone who spends all day arguing with little girls and getting dragged into their games isn't exactly proving himself to be very mature. Annie, stop. She ignored me. You don't seem to want to behave like an adult. I tried to sit up.
Please.
Annie easily stopped me from getting away. Then perhaps you need a reminder of how ridiculous you've been acting. She looked toward Polly. Open your suitcase. Polly's face immediately brightened. Really? Go ahead. Polly eagerly opened the case. Annie began looking through the clothes. What should we choose? Polly looked delighted. Anything. Annie smiled thinly. Something suitable for your little brother. I'm not her brother. Neither of them paid attention. Polly pulled out several brightly colored items, clearly fascinated by the whole situation. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. Annie picked up a pink and white polka dot outfit. She held it up and looked at me. If you're determined to act like a child, Oliver, then perhaps you should stop pretending you need an adult's wardrobe. I stared at the outfit in disbelief. The humiliation of the garden suddenly felt very close again. And judging from Polly's delighted expression, I had a terrible feeling this weekend was about to become much worse. That's how this weekend is going to work, Annie said. We'll treat you according to how you're behaving. I don't mean any of this. I'm sorry. You've already said that. Her tone remained completely unmoved as she pulled a pair of white frilled ankle socks onto my feet. Polly rummaged through her suitcase and produced a dress. This one. She held it up proudly. It'll look perfect with his blonde hair. Then she reconsidered. I don't really wear it anymore. It's a little short on me. I stared at the dress. It was a pink and white striped sundress with small bows on the shoulder straps and a decorative petal trim around the hem. It looked like something meant for a much younger girl. Annie held it against me. The skirt reached only to around mid-thigh, and the loose, lightweight material moved around my small frame whenever I shifted. I felt ridiculous. I'll do her hair, Polly announced. She dug into her glittery little bag and pulled out 2 pink flower clips. Before I could object, she gathered my long blonde hair into 2 large bunches and secured them with the clips. At the same time, Annie produced a pair of sparkly pink jelly sandals. They were obviously too small, but somehow my feet squeezed into them. Perfect, Polly declared. Then Veronica appeared at the connecting doorway. Why don't you help us, Veronica? Annie gestured toward Polly's suitcase. Polly, sweetheart, why don't you choose some clothes for your sister? Poor Olivia forgot her luggage. Polly's face lit up. Sure. I brought loads. Maybe we should let Olivia choose, Annie suggested. Oh, I don't mind sharing. Polly opened the suitcase wider. Go ahead, Olivia. Annie pointed toward the contents. Underwear and socks first. Good girl. I felt strangely weak. The sundress fluttered around my legs whenever I moved, while the 2 bunches of hair bounced against my shoulders. I couldn't believe this was actually happening again. Polly carefully arranged several options across the bed. Pick 3 pairs. I looked down. 3. Annie nodded. 3 pairs of underwear and 3 pairs of socks. I reluctantly selected 3 without really looking at them. Veronica glanced at the choices. Polka dots? She seems to like those. Polly smiled. She had clearly thought this through. The next selection was even worse. Every pair of trousers and shorts had mysteriously disappeared from the available choices. Only skirts remained. When Annie told me to choose 3 dresses, Polly laid out 6 options. Every single one was unmistakably girly. I stared at them. You can't be serious. Annie simply smiled. Then Polly produced another surprise. She'll need a swimsuit too. She placed 4 swimming costumes on the bed. 2 were small bikinis, 1 aqua blue and 1 pink. The other 2 were one-piece suits in lavender and yellow, both decorated with frills. I stared at them in disbelief. You're joking. Give her the bikinis, Annie decided. They're adorable. Okay, Auntie Annie. Polly happily collected the 2 bikinis and placed them into the drawer. Annie then turned back toward me. Now, little lady, what do you say to Polly? I looked at her. For letting you borrow her clothes after you forgot your suitcase? Polly was standing nearby with a huge grin.
Thank you, Polly.
Annie shook her head.
No.
That's not nearly enough. She gestured toward Polly. Give your sister a proper hug and a kiss, and thank her properly. I slowly walked over. Polly smiled expectantly. I wrapped my arms around her and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek.
Thank you, Polly.
That was very kind. Better, Annie said. Then she frowned. Although you still sound like Oliver. I looked down. Annie placed her hands on my shoulders and turned me to face her. You're going to be Olivia this weekend. She paused. So, start getting used to it. Then she looked directly into my eyes. Now tell us your name. I swallowed. And how old are you?